Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right, well, today we're going back to ancient India,
Okay.
the Mauryan Empire, to be exact, somewhere around, let's say, 322 to 185 BCE.
Big empire, huge.
Yeah, and I mean, most people know them for, like, conquering a ton of land, right?
Right.
But what's really cool is that they didn't just change the map. They changed how people thought and lived.
Oh, yeah. Especially when it comes to religion. I mean, Buddhism really took off during this time.
That's what we're going to get into.
Yeah, let's dive in.
We've got some great stuff from our earlier deep dives, too, the ones on the Vedas and the Mahajanapadas.
Yeah, those are key, crucial context, actually. I mean, if we really want to get the full picture of what changed during the Mauryan Empire, you got to understand what came before.
So paint us a picture. What was India like before the Mauryan Empire?
Well, imagine India not as one unified country, but like a bunch of independent states. They were called Mahajanapadas. Essentially, these were the first major kingdoms in ancient India, setting the stage for all the empires that came after.
So the Mahajanapadas were like the building blocks of a unified India. What were they like? Give us the inside scoop.
Think about it. Small nomadic tribes transforming into powerful kingdoms. I mean, it was a huge shift. And what's fascinating is this political evolution happening at the same time that the Vedas were being composed.
Wait, hold on. You're saying that while these kingdoms were forming, the foundation of Hindu thought with those ancient texts was also being laid. That seems like, I don't know, more than just a coincidence.
Right. And get this, those Vedic ideas, they weren't just some abstract concepts floating around. They were like deeply woven into how these Mahajanapadas actually worked.
Okay, like how?
Like dharma, it wasn't just about like being a good person. It was more like your cosmic duty, your specific role in the universe based on your place in society.
Ah, I see. So everyone had a specific part to play in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And to keep everyone in check with their dharma, there was karma, the cosmic scorecard. Every action, boom, has a consequence, not just in this life, but maybe even in future lives, right? Encourage people to stick to their dharma, sort of a built-in system to maintain order in the universe.
Well, I love that analogy, the cosmic scorecard. That's really helpful. So these ideas, dharma and karma, they were like the operating system for these early kingdoms.
Exactly. They influenced everything, hierarchies, laws, even how kings justified their rule. It was all tied to dharma.
Fascinating. So how did we go from these Mahajanapadas with their dharma and karma to the mighty Mauryan Empire?
Well, out of all these Mahajanapadas, one emerged as the dominant force, Magadha.
Magadha.
Yeah. They had the prime location in the fertile Gangetic Plains, plus crucial resources like iron for making weapons. And of course, they had ambitious rulers who weren't afraid to use that iron.
Iron weapons, fertile land, ambitious rulers.
Right.
Sounds like the recipe for a successful empire. But the Mauryan Empire wasn't just about brute force, right? That's where Buddhism enters the scene.
Absolutely. The Mauryan Empire, especially under Emperor Ashoka the Great, was a turning point for the spread of Buddhism.
Ashoka. He's the one who had that famous change of heart, right?
You got it. The story goes, after a particularly brutal battle, he turns to Buddhism.
Well,
And not only that, but he made it the state religion, a pretty radical move, especially back then.
yeah. I mean, remember how we were just talking about those Vedic ideas, dharma and karma, that were so central to these early kingdoms?
Yeah.
And here comes Buddhism, challenging some of those established norms, like the authority of the Vedas and the caste system. It's like it offered a whole different path to enlightenment, one focused on compassion and nonviolence, escaping from suffering.
Exactly, a completely different perspective.
So this emperor, Ashoka, he wasn't just focused on expanding his territory, but also on, like, transforming his empire on a spiritual and ethical level. What did that look like in practice? Like, how did he actually implement these Buddhist ideals?
Well, Ashoka was all about spreading Buddhism through state patronage. He went all out. Built stupas, those Buddhist shrines and monasteries.
Okay.
Sent missionaries to other countries to spread the word. And even had his edicts, his laws and teachings, carved into pillars on rock.
Whoa, carved in stone for everyone to see. He wasn't messing around. So were these edicts all about religion?
Not at all. I mean, sure, they had some religious aspects, but Ashoka was also all about ethical reforms. He pushed for nonviolence, tolerance, social welfare, even things like environmental conservation.
Whoa, social welfare and environmentalism centuries ago.
Mm.
That's incredible. He sounds way ahead of his time. So what was the impact of all this? Did it actually change anything?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Buddhism spread throughout India and then beyond to other parts of Asia. It eventually became a major world religion. We see its influence even today in art, architecture, literature, you name it.
It's amazing how one emperor's conversion could have such a ripple effect on history. But what about everyday life? How did things change for the average person living under Ashoka's rule?
Well, I think it's safe to say that Ashoka's emphasis on ethics and social responsibility really did filter down into daily life. People started adopting some of these principles, and it created a real cultural shift, set new social benchmarks, not just for India, but for the wider world too.
So it wasn't just about grand gestures or, symbolic acts. He actually wanted to impact the lives of everyday people.
Yeah,
And all of this stemming from the Mauryan Empire's embrace of Buddhism.
precisely. The Mauryan Empire, especially under Ashoka, wasn't just about political power or territory. It was a catalyst for profound cultural and religious change, especially with Buddhism taking root and flourishing. And really, it set in motion a chain of events that shaped India's relationship with the world for centuries to come. And you know what's really interesting? Those ripples of change, they kept going, spreading outwards. Centuries later, even the British East India Company, as they were expanding their influence in
The
India,
British East India Company.
yeah, they got kind of fascinated by these ancient Vedic texts.
Huh. That's not what I would have expected. I mean, what were they even looking for in the Vedas?
Well, this was like the 18th century, right? And to them, those Vedas were like proof of a well-established legal and social order in India. Like they called it an ancient constitution. They wanted to understand how things worked, the existing systems of governance, and they were particularly interested in dharma, that concept we talked about.
So were they, like, trying to learn from the Vedas to figure out how to rule more effectively? Or was there something else going on?
Well, they said they were upholding this ancient system, this righteous rule, right? Like
Yeah.
that their whole reason for being in India was to maintain this pre-existing order. They even tried to use dharma to support their claim.
It sounds like they were using the Vedas to legitimize their rule, trying to align themselves with these ancient Indian traditions. Do you think they genuinely believed that, or was it more about appearances?
It's tough to say, really. I mean, they were definitely intrigued by the Vedas, no doubt about that. But they kind of interpreted them in a way that served their own interests, They
Okay.
picked and chose the parts that fit their agenda, presenting themselves as the saviors of India. Like they were there to restore its former glory.
So they were twisting the Vedas, taking this complex ancient text and using it to justify their actions, to
Mhm.
solidify their power.
Yeah, you could say that. It was a pretty selective way of using Indian knowledge. But there's another layer here, too. Remember, the Vedas, those were composed way before the Mahajanapadas even emerged. So the British were like imposing their own ideas of law and governance onto these ancient texts.
Wow, yeah, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly. And of course, this clash between how they interpreted the Vedas and the reality of how Indian society actually worked, that caused a lot of problems, a lot of resentment. Ultimately, their interest in Indian culture and philosophy, it didn't stop them from imposing their own vision on India.
It's almost tragic, Their initial interest in understanding Indian thought, it kind of morphed into this way to control and exploit the very people they claimed to be helping. It's a reminder to be careful how we use knowledge.
It is. It reminds us to be critical of how history is presented, to always consider the motivations of those who are writing it, because power dynamics, they always play a role in how we interpret and use knowledge.
That's a great point. So we've gone from the Mahajanapadas to the Mauryan Empire and their embrace of Buddhism, all the way to the British East India Company's fascination with the Vedas.
Quite a journey.
It is. It really highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? All these seemingly separate events, they're all threads woven into the tapestry of Indian history. Religion, culture, power, they've always been intertwined in shaping this civilization.
Absolutely.
So what stands out to you in all this? Like, what's the biggest takeaway from this historical journey?
For me, it's really about recognizing the enduring impact of these ancient ideas. They're still relevant, still influencing things today. Political systems, social structures, even cultural identities. Take Ashoka's edicts, for example. Those weren't just words carved in stone. He was etching these ideals of compassion, justice, social responsibility onto the very landscape of India.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And those ideals continue to inspire people even today.
Mhm.
And it makes me think about how Ashoka's reforms were part of this global trend, this axial age.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That period between, let's say, 600 and 300 BCE, where similar shifts were happening in different parts of the world.
Like the whole world was experiencing a collective awakening.
Right, like across civilizations, you have people questioning everything, societies, beliefs, the meaning of life. I mean, you've got Socrates challenging the status quo in ancient Greece, Zoroaster introducing this idea of a cosmic battle between good and evil in Persia.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's like humanity having a synchronized aha moment.
It really was. And it just shows that these things, the Mahajanapadas, the Mauryan Empire, they weren't just isolated events. They were part of this vast network of ideas and influences that were shaping the world.
It's a powerful reminder of how interconnected we all are, even across like vast distances in time.
Exactly. And the Mauryan Empire, it wasn't just about military strength or controlling land. It played this crucial role in how Indian civilization evolved, a time of incredible cultural and religious change, especially with Buddhism gaining momentum.
And those changes, they still resonate today, influencing how we understand India, its people, and their amazing journey.
Precisely. The past isn't just some collection of facts and figures, It's a living narrative. It shapes and is shaped by the present, constantly.
So what does that mean for us today? How can we, apply these insights to our own lives?
I think it reminds us that these seemingly isolated events, they're often part of larger trends and patterns and ideas, whether they're religious, political, philosophical. They have this incredible power to shape the course of history. It encourages us to look for those connections, to understand the complexities of the past, and maybe even draw inspiration from the wisdom of those who came before us.
It's about finding those threads that connect us to the past and using them to weave a more compassionate and just future.
Beautifully put.
And who knows what other amazing discoveries are waiting for us as we delve deeper into history. It's really been quite the journey, hasn't it? From those early Mahajanapadas to the Mauryan Empire and their huge impact on religion and culture, all the way to the British East India Company and their interesting take on the Vedas.
Yeah, and even zooming out to see how all of this fit into that global shift during the axial age, like, wow.
Exactly. And, when we really look closely at the Mauryan Empire, I think it shows us so much more than just political power, or who conquered what land. It was a period of, like, intense cultural and religious change. And Buddhism under Ashoka played a huge role in that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's easy to get caught up in the what of history, the names and dates and battles. But this deep dive has really helped us understand the why and the how behind it all, the beliefs, the motivations, the consequences.
Mm.
It's like those ancient Vedic ideas, dharma and karma. They weren't just abstract concepts, right? They were woven into the very fabric of those Mahajanapadas, and they even shaped how later empires, like the Mauryans, approached things like governing.
Right, they were really foundational ideas.
And it's just amazing to think about how Ashoka's personal conversion to Buddhism, like his own individual decision, had such massive consequences. It wasn't just religious change, it was social, ethical,
Yeah, it makes you think, like, what if we studied those edicts today?
ancient ones.
Yeah, could they offer some insights for promoting peace and understanding in our own time?
Wow, yeah. Looking to the past to like help solve the problems of the present. That's a pretty powerful idea.
I think so. The past isn't just a bunch of dusty old stories. It's full of wisdom that we can learn from.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Mauryan Empire, what would you say is like the most important thing you want our listeners to take away?
Well, I think the big takeaway is that the Mauryan Empire wasn't just a blip on the radar screen of history. It was a defining era for Indian civilization, and it shows us how powerful ideas can be, whether they're religious, political, or philosophical. They can completely transform societies, and their impact can last for centuries.
And that history is so much more than facts and dates. It's a story that's still being written even today.
Well said.
And that's another deep dive in the books. Until next time, keep exploring.